Hi there, hi there. Welcome to the Beadsmith presents the Boho necklace. A couple things before I get started. This meeting is being recorded, so all of you who are watching and those of you who can't hear me yet because you're going to come in late, it's being recorded and there will be a link posted in the chat room to send you to where the classes are online so that you can watch this again. So I am Leslie Rogowski, the creative director for the Beadsmith, and I am joined today by my bestie Beadsmith buddy, Leslie Pope, who is going to be our monitor. She'll be trying to answer your questions and letting me know when you have things that I may need to repeat and so on. But please watch the video for a while at least. Watch the lesson for a while before you start to try to make things. It's good to take notes so that you can ask questions. I may be answering them for you as I go along. Because you all are going to think ahead about what you're going to want to know, and I'll probably get to them. But you can put them in the chat and the other Leslie will answer them for you. Again,
save
remember
the hard ones for you. Or save the hard ones for you.
Yeah, okay. So Leslie will do just that, and she'll say, can you stop a second and repeat that, or ask me the questions, and I'll try to leave time at the end also. So there's also going to be a link in the chat to the PDF. Everything that I do is going to have a tutorial like this, and this is what we're going to be working on today, and it's going to have everything that I'm going to talk to you about. We're going to talk a lot about design because the necklace I want to show you is asymmetrical, but there's lots of ways to still keep that balanced. And then I have charts for you with exactly the components, so you'll be able to go in and make the exact necklace or put your own spin on it. So the PDF again will appear in the chat. And you can watch it over and over on the recording. So please watch this for a little while before you start to try to do anything along. Okay, are we ready? So the Boho necklace. Let's take a look at the bead board and I'll talk to you about this. Boho is short for Bohemian. So get your inner spirit and let it out for this project. Let's talk about the tools. The featured tool to make this is going to help you to make completely consistent uniform loops in your wire. This is essentially a chain, a beaded chain that we're making. And we're going to be working with the looper. The loopers will form and cut a loop the same size every time. I'm going to work with the big looper, which makes 3mm loops. This one makes 1.5mm loops, so smaller. And I've chosen to use the big looper because it gives a lot of swing in the necklace. So we have the looper. I'm working with 20 gauge wire. 20 gauge is nice. It's substantial and hard enough to hold the shape, but it's easy to use with the tool. Right tool for the right job. You're also going to need 2 pairs of pliers, just a chain nose, a round nose, a wire snip. I'm going to give you a safety tip when I start to demo this. And it's handy to have some kind of a nylon jaw pliers because when you work with wire, you'll be able to unkink it. And again, I'll show you that too. Then, of course, we have the beads. I was thrilled to find from Bead Landing this Southwest bead collection. So it has this whole assortment ready for you. And I picked the beads that I liked for my necklace from this box. So you can see there's lots of shapes and it's all coordinated for you. But look, you know Michaels has the beads, right? So you can go in and put together your own collection of beads once you learn how to do this. All right, let's see, I think I got everything. Oh, and of course, some jump rings. One of the things you're gonna see is that you can connect an element to an element, or you can use a jump ring between the elements. I'm talking about the little beaded sections or elements. When you put a jump ring in, again, it allows this swing. So you have a really nice drape to your necklace and it's not going to jut out in any stiff ways. All righty. So the first thing I'm going to do is pick out some beads and we're going to make some of the elements or the modules. And I'm going to do exactly what I did in this necklace as examples. And I want to tell you too that one of the design things that helps with something like this is repetition. Repetition can be color, which you see in this necklace, red spaced out. Repetition can also be size or scale. So you might want to make lots of a certain component, a certain element to be able to space them out. This helps balance your necklace. And scale. Big beads scattered around in different places. They do not have to be in the same place symmetrically. You can see how I have one of the big red beads at the bottom. And this is something else, when you do a chain, you want to make sure that it lays in a nice rounded way. So you're going to want to distribute kind of the weight that goes with the size here of the different components. All right, let's learn how to use the looper. I'm going to move this away for a minute. And I have tinned copper, which is a nice silver color, not too shiny, in the 20 gauge. I'm going to take that out. It's just looped on here. Now I'm going to trim off the little kinked end. And here's a safety tip. When you're working with wire, anytime you're working with wire, you want to be sure that you're covering where you're snipping, because the wire will fly off. It can hit you, can hit somebody else. It can fly right into your computer screen, all of that. So what you're going to do is get your pliers in position, put your hand over it just like that, and snip. And I could feel it hit the underside of my hand. It won't hurt you when it does that. You're going to work from the spool of wire for this project in order to try to conserve wire. But you will end up with pieces that could be used in the future. So I keep a little bowl handy to keep my snips of wire in. I'll put that one in there, even though it's small. And then I can go back and use wire. I don't like to try to figure out exactly how much wire. It's hard to do that. All right, let's make a simple loop with the looper. Now I have rather small hands, but the way you use the looper is to grab both of the handles like this. Now, because it's a stretch for me, and it may be for some of you too, I put my handle, one of the handles, on my work table and press it there with my thumb so I don't have to be grabbing around it. And then I'm able to maneuver this. So I want to bring this up to show you how this works. You can see when I move it, do you see this part inside here? That's going to form it and cut it at the same time. There's a little hole through the outside here that acts as a guide for your wire. So I'm going to take my wire on my spool and I'm going to fit it in like this. You can see it goes under that little cylindrical part and above the two parts of the jaw that will be bending in. Of course, I bent it. Let's snip that off so it's easier for you. Eventually, you'll get in the habit of just putting your hand over the wire when you snip it too. You can have your wire just poking out a little bit. There we go. And I'm not going to hold my wire still with my left hand. I'm going to let the pliers curl it. But I want to make sure that the wire is flat down against the bottom part of the looper. See, I just let it bend where it wants, and now I'm going to wiggle it off. Look at that. Now I want you to see when I turn it sideways, you can see that the loop is not quite touching the stem wire. So you're going to take your round nose pliers and go in and make sure, let's see, so you can see, make sure that the end of that loop is touching the stem of the wire. All right, now let's say I just want to put a single bead on. I can hold it up and eyeball it that I'm going to want to cut my wire, you know, leave myself enough so I don't come short. And I'm going to position my snips. Now I'm going to hold that piece of wire because I don't want it to fly away and not know where it is, and hold the end of the spool wire, turn my hand so I'm covering the wire where I'm cutting it, and I end up like this. Nothing flies away. I'm going to do that again. And this time I'm going to put my looper down on the table to show you, if you have small hands, that you can still do this. You're going to thread your wire over the two cutting parts and against the little cylinder and just against the little hole in the back, or you can have it come out. And I'm going to put this down on the table. There we go. So you can see like this. Make sure that the wire is flat against the underside of your looper and give it a nice chunk. And again, I was holding the spool, but I wasn't keeping my wire from bending. Now, this didn't turn out great. There's two things you can do. You can take your pliers and try to reposition it. So I took my flat nose and I grabbed the loop and bend it back. That'll work for me. I'm going to snip a piece, holding onto it with my fingers, covering it with my hand so nothing flies away. Now I have two pieces of wire. Okay, this one is a little crooked, so you can go in again with your flat nose or chain nose and adjust it so that it's a little more perpendicular to the stem. How are we doing out there so far? Do we have questions coming in, Leslie?
I have someone who said mine cut the wire off. Not quite sure exactly what that means.
Well, it
Maybe
should cut the wire. Oh, well,
Lynn Dennis, can you send me a little more explanation in the chat? So
okay, I have a question for that person, because some people think you need to put the wire like through this way. You don't want to put it through that way. You want to make sure that you have a length of wire, and it should only be cutting off the end. Let's do it again close up. So I have it from the spool, and I put it in over the cutters and under the cylinder, out the little the hole in the back. Give it a crunch. So the only part that's cut off is the extra that was on the end that bent around to form the loop. But at the end of this workshop, I can come back to that. If this is an issue that people are having, we can try to figure that out. And I'm going to take my flat nose pliers and straighten out that loop. And I'm going to snip a little bigger piece. So now I have 3 wires to put beads on. So we can do a single, we can do a double, or a triple. This is really the fun part of making these necklaces, because you have components, all these different elements. 5 beads, 3 beads, 3 different beads. All right, to do the wire with a bead on it, not really trickier, but let's give it a shot. So I have my short wire and I'm going to string a bead. Now the beads that you choose to use, the only rule is the hole has to be big enough to accommodate your 20 gauge wire. So you want to make sure, there you go, that you have a decent sized hole, but you don't want a hole that's too big because the bead will wobble around and it's going to sit askew. So just choose your beads wisely. Now, I have a bead on the wire, and you're going to make your loop with the looper the same way. But instead of holding a spool of wire, you have a bead on you're making an eye with your wire. So you have it against the eye of the wire, and you want to kind of hold that so it's against the eye. And you're going to put your wire in. Make sure it's pressed down against the bottom of the looper and coming out the little hole, and hold it against the looper gently, but let it bend around until you feel that grab, and then give it a good crunch. If you don't crunch it hard enough, the wire end is not going to snip off, and I'll give you some troubleshooting for there. But you can see that I have to go in and take another pliers. Now there you can see that it's not meeting the stem. Let's get that in focus. So you're going to take your round nose pliers and you're going to make sure that the end of the loop comes right to the bead. There's a little wiggle room. Also, I want you to notice that on this, my loops are not parallel. They're turned perpendicular. So you want to take one pair of pliers and hold either one of the loops. I'm going to change that to my left hand. And you're going to take your other pliers and you're going to just gently twist the loops so they're both facing parallel. This way, when you attach with jump rings, you have, again, a nice layout for your chain to drape nicely. All right, let's see what happens when we put a couple beads on. I'm going to open my treasure box here, my Southwest box. Put this over here so you guys can drool over it. I know there was a variation of this crafting box that had like black and silver in it. I was really tempted to use that for this workshop, but I wanted some color. All right, so when you're choosing your beads, like the necklace shows, you want to have some variety in the next piece. So I'm going to choose just 2, let's see. I'm going to pick out, you have to dig into these little compartments because there's some really cool stuff. Here's some little spacers, some little brass colored spacers, and a kind of a crackled red bead. I'm going to string a spacer, a bigger bead, and a spacer. So now I have 3 beads with some color, but it's going to end up being almost the same size as the single bead. So this would help you to create balance in scale if you position these around your necklace. All right. Again, I'm holding the beads against the eye that's already made. And I'm going to insert it into the looper, over the cutters, under the little cylinder, and through the little hole in the back. And make sure that it's pressed up against the looper. And I'm going to start to crunch it, let it go, and crunch it, and wiggle it off. Ooh, I did a pretty good job on that one, if I do say so myself. All right, now I'm going to take my round nose and make sure that that's closed all the way so the loop is touching the long stem. And you want this to happen, you want to do it before you make your necklace, because your necklace will come apart. When the hole of a jump ring matches the hole that's left in your loop, they're going to find each other and slide right apart. Okay, and now I'm going to make sure that these are parallel. The 20 gauge is actually kind of soft. As you see, I held that with my fingers, but tools are good. Make sure that those are parallel. And I'm going to add that to my growing stash. These are beads that I made earlier. All right, let's see. Repetition is another design thing I was talking about. You're welcome, Brenda. I'm glad you like that tip. So I'm going to make another trio here, and I'm going to pull out my 2 little brass colored coins and one of the silver barrels for my long piece of wire. Now, a lot of these beads are hollow, so when you thread your wire through, you're going to have to jiggle it around to find the hole on the opposite side. No biggie. All right. Coin. My little silver pumpkin bead, right? And coin. And make sure that they're pulled nice and snug against the eye. Here we go with the looper. Over the cutters, under the cylinder, and into the little hole that's on the back, the guide hole. You can see it sticking out there, right? I'm trying to get the light so you can see. Push it up against the pliers, start to close it, make sure it's flat against the back, and crunch. Now this one's pretty open, but it's very fixable. Can you guys see this here? It's a little twisted. I'm going to put my round nose in. And wiggle it till it's closed, like that. Grab it with the pliers, make sure it's parallel to the other ones. There we go. Now we have 2. Now what you want to start to do now is use a bead board. I'm not sure I mentioned this in the beginning, but the bead board is a fabulous thing to have to lay out necklaces. It really helps you in so many ways because you have compartments to organize. It has measurements and it has different channels, which helped me when I made the long necklace that I was showing you and the 2 that I have on. So I don't know if you can show them how the necklaces I'm wearing lay nested. There you go. So you can see that these are. To get this kind of nice nesting, and I'll show you with this because it goes right over my head. So you can see to get this nice draping, and of course you can adjust it however you want, the channels in the bead board will guide you through that so you're not constantly trying to guess. Okay, back to the bead board. make some room here, and we're going to start to actually make this necklace. So this necklace is asymmetrical. And in order to keep it still looking balanced, even though it's not the same on both sides, here we go. I actually start with the bead on the very bottom. I know that's going to be one of my heavier beads, my larger beads. And I want to have smaller beads just for like maybe 2 inches on either side of it so that it drapes nicely. If you have a large component at the bottom of your necklace, I'm going to show you what happens. You're going to have this kind of a look, which is fine if that's what you're going for. But if you want something nice and draped, you want to save your longer elements, your longer components for the sides where they're going to hang straight down the side. And this necklace has a clasp. Okay. Let's see. Here's my bottom one. Put that back in my channels. So I have already made the 2 little side components with these great kind of oxidized copper beads. And I'm now going to make the big red one. First, I'm going to make a mess, then I'm going to make the big red one. Okay. Now I have my loop already made, and I'm going to string the bead through, make sure it's up against there. Feed the end wire over the cutters, under the cylinder, and through the hole in the back. Make sure that the wire is flat against the underside of your looper. And make sure that your bead is pushed up against this part of the pliers, the first part that it touches. I'm going to push that in as snug as I can. Give it a crunch. See how I let it go once I had a grip on it, and pull it off. Now I can see again, I need to adjust my loops. Take my round nose pliers, close that up, grab it, turn it with the other pliers, hold it so that the loops are parallel. And there we go. Now, when you do this kind of looping chain necklace, you can attach the components right to each other. But first, I'm going to show you how to use a jump ring, because that's what I did in my necklace. So I have nice silver colored 6mm open jump rings. When you open a jump ring, I'm going to do this with my hands. You don't ever want to open a jump ring this way. You want to open a jump ring this way. So I'm going to use 2 pliers for this. I'm going to find the opening of the jump ring. And I'm going to take my other pliers and I'm going to twist them a little bit, just like this. See how that is? And I'm going to loop one component and I'm going to loop the other component. So they're both on the jump ring. I'm going to grab my jump ring again with 1 pair of pliers, and I'm going to take the other. And I want you to notice that I'm not doing this with the tip of the round nose. I'm using the side of it so that it doesn't bend the jump ring except to bring it together. And the way you know a jump ring is together is you're going to hear a little click when those 2 ends come together. Now you have this nice little dangly part. Do that again on the other side. open the jump ring just enough to string one component and another component. Use your second pliers to close the jump ring. Listen for that little click. I can hear it, it's too soft for you guys. Make sure your jump ring is closed. There should be no space. There we go. Now I have this wonderful flexible part for the bottom of my necklace. I'm going to show you how to attach two components without a jump ring. Here's one I made earlier. It has one of these really cool faceted turquoise beads and a couple of the other little spacers. Now your eye is essentially just like a jump ring. It has an opening and you're going to want to open it sideways, not wideways. So I'm going to find which end is open. There we go. And I'm just going to turn it just a little bit like that. All you have to do now is connect to the next component that you want and close it the same way. Close it up, make sure that you bring that end back to touch the stem again.
Can I interject that it's always easier when you're opening and closing things to use your dominant hand as opposed to your non-dominant hand?
Yes, that's true. I'm using my non-dominant hand. I'm a righty, so I'm using my left hand as the muscle to hold it. In this case, I was holding the beads, and my dominant hand to open and close. Good tip. Thank you, Leslie.
You're welcome.
So what this does is by connecting them with a jump ring, you're adding space between your elements. This is to be used just like any other scale, any other type of proportion or size in order to create a balance in your necklace. Even when you have different colors and different sizes, if the spacing is even, it's going to give your necklace this really nice, consistent, intentional flow. That's what you need to think about when you lay things out. And now we can just keep building.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Why is this considered bohemian style? Does it have to do with the color of the beads?
It does, yes. Boho is a term, or bohemian, that goes to freedom of expression. I grew up in the 60s, so there was a lot of that kind of organic approach to design and lots of colors. Also, I think in particular, the earthy colors of like a Southwest palette really play into that kind of bohemian style. If you look on fashion sites and things online, you're going to see boho refers to vibrant prints and colors, and I almost want to say like gypsy, what we would have called gypsy, or hippie. Does that age me if I say that? But it really has to do with a freedom in the kind of design and the color. It's always full of life, boho stuff, always full of color, pattern. Did that answer your question? Boho is just short for bohemian. So bohemian is that kind of more artsy kind of a look, as opposed to something that people might refer to as you know, a more finished or fine. And it tends to be a casual kind of a style too. All right, so I'm going to make another component here with the turquoise and the little spacers. And I kind of know how big a piece that I want. I lost my cutter. There you go. Usually I'm so spread out when I make this stuff. It's everywhere. All right, so again, I'm just going to cut a piece. I'm holding one end. I put my cutter on, cover it, snip it. Make a loop over the cutters under the forming cylinder out the back, just a little bit. Hold the end, but don't hold it still. Let it go where it goes when you crunch the looper. That's a pretty good one. I'm just going to take my chain nose pliers and just straighten that out so I have that lollipop eye pin look. Now I'm going to string the spacer and the turquoise and the spacer. And make another loop. Now this loop is going to get attached right to the loop of the component so that we did it like that on the other side. Push the beads all the way up to the looper. Make sure your wire is flat against the underside of the looper. Give it a good crunch. Wiggle it off. Take your round nose, close up that loop. Whoops. If they're not perpendicular, if they're not parallel, grab one in one pliers, grab the other loop in the other pliers, turn them so they're now both facing the same way. And this is going to get attached on the other side. I'm going to open the loop on the part of the necklace that's starting to chain up, and I'm going to open it just like I would with a jump ring, which is sidewise, not widewise. Whoops, I grabbed the wrong part. There we go. Just a little bit. Hook it on, close it up. Remember to close it up with the loop inside the loop. Otherwise, it's not going to hold together. All right. There we go. Now we're starting, we have a nice drapey bottom to our necklace here. And even though I used the same pieces on either side here, like I did on the bottom one, I'm going to start to do something asymmetrical now. So I'm going to take a piece I made earlier that's asymmetrical in itself, and just 3 beads. And I'm going to attach it with a jump ring. And I'm going to make another one in a second. I'm going to attach it with a jump ring because I'm starting to reach a part of my necklace where I still want a little bit more curve. I don't want this to be really stiff looking. So I'm going to open a jump ring and attach that one. This pliers and this pliers. Sideways, not wideways. See if you can see that. Okay. Pick up my chain, loop the component there. I think I want the smaller one on the bottom, so I'm gonna loop that. Grab my jump ring with the other pliers. And close it till it clicks. Oh, you heard the click that time, right? Okay. Now, I think I want another different kind of bead on the other side, but it still has to be kind of about the same size. So I'm going to pick up, let's see, another one I made earlier. It's about the same length. And I'm going to attach this one with a jump ring too. So like one of the fun things about making an asymmetrical necklace is kind of making it up to go along as you go along if you want. But after I put this one on, I'm just going to start to make components and continue to make you more familiar with the looper and lay them out along here. And you can see how the rulers that are on the bead board are really going to help. All right, so I have an open jump ring and I'm going to string this on there and I'm going to string my other component on, close up the jump rings. I can actually close it up with my fingers. My hands are pretty strong. So now we have this going on. So now as I look at this, let's take this one away for a minute. All right, there's a nice balance. There's a balance of color, obviously, because this is symmetrical. And then I have some repeat of the copper splash in these. I've red. I think I'm going to want some more red, but I'm probably going to want it like up here. So I have a component that I made. It's a little one, but I'm just going to put that up there for now. And I have a couple more. Here's a pair that I made. So I can do something to introduce a kind of a balance by laying them out. So you have one on each side of the necklace, but do you see how they're in different positions? So as I start to work more, let's see, let's bring in maybe some.
I have a couple of questions for you, Leslie.
Sure, let's hear them.
Okay, so Jackie wants to know, how do you determine when to use a jump ring or not?
Good question. The jump rings give you more fluidity in your chain. So what that means is that it drapes and bends with more space there. As opposed to something that's just connected, it's just going to be a little tighter of a curl. It also makes a difference if you want to have that space between the beads to space them out. So if you wanted to, you could add a few jump rings in a row without any beads and really have a focus on what you choose to do here and make a chain up. You can have an asymmetrical bottom with an inch or two of just jump rings hooked together to give you space. Actually, why don't I do something here? If I put extra jump rings on either side of this and then build up to do something on the other side, see, it's balanced, but it's not going to be symmetrical. You're going to have an airier look to your necklace. Did that answer your question, Jackie?
Probably.
Probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the next question is, do you suggest making all of the components beforehand and attaching them, or making a component at a time and attaching them?
You know, that's a really good question too, because it really depends on what kind of a designer you are. When I work with beads, I like to have a lot of stuff out in front of me. So I generally will make my components and have them, and I'll make 2 of one or 3 of one or 1 of one and have them all out, and then start to put them around to see how I want to lay out my necklace. You can even just do it with beads. I'm just taking some of the beads now to see where I want the color. So I guess the answer to your question is, I personally find it helpful to have them made already. But the whole time I'm doing it, I'm thinking about how many of those components I want and how I'm going to repeat them around. Now, the things that I had already made here were left over from the last time I made a necklace. I actually decided not to use them in a necklace. But I would say, excellent question. It's very helpful to make a lot of components ahead of time and lay them out.
And we are at the 15-minute mark.
Okay,
Leslie.
well, I will take more questions. I want to remind everybody again that this session is being recorded, so you can go back and watch it again. And please download the PDF. There'll be a link provided for you as well. I'm not sure that's available yet, but it will be by tomorrow. I don't know if the link is up in the chat or not.
It is, but it's working for some people and not for other people.
Okay.
But Michaels will also email everyone a copy of the PDF.
Excellent. So everything that I've talked about today, about design, about how to use the looper, the exact components that are in the necklaces that are shown, in the cover shot will all be in the PDF. So when you get the PDF, you come back to the recording, and then you can stop the recording and make the necklace as we go along. So once you feel comfortable with this, and it won't take you long to feel like you've got the hang of this. And remember, that's what your pliers are for, to make adjustments for things afterwards. I want to show you one more sort of oopsie that can happen when you use the looper. If it doesn't cut your loop, of course, this one's going to keep cutting. If it doesn't cut the loop, it'll form the loop and there'll be a little tail coming off of here. You can, I want to try to make that happen. You can still, did you see how I held the piece of wire and covered it with my hand when I snipped it? All right. Usually this happens if you're not doing this hard enough. Well, this is a really sharp looper, so it keeps doing it. Yeah, I wanted to show you a goof and now I can't goof, right? Here, I'm going to do it with my round nose just to show you what it's going to look like. When you do it and it doesn't cut, it's kind of going to look like this. It's going to have that tail. Now there's two things you can do. You can trim that end off, covering it with your hand, and toss it and do it again. Or you can take your snips and you're going to put the nose of the snips inside the loop to cut off the tail. And the reason you do that is so that accidentally, if you're trying to do it like this from the outside, you could accidentally cut it too short or, you know, cut it. It's easier for you to get it right at that part. Cover it with your hand, and then go back in with your round nose and tighten it up.
Okay, we have two more questions.
All right.
Does this wire change color from perfume or sweat? If
You know,
it does,
it depends. It depends on you too. Different
Yeah.
perfumes and right.
and
This
so
permanently colored wire, so it should not change color. The artistic wire.
okay, all right. And the second question is, how do you keep your looper sharp?
It stays sharp. It's a very well-made tool. I don't know if you can see, there's actually like a little bit of sort of machine oil in there. You also want to use it on the right wire. This is not meant for really heavy duty wire. So you can work with, and it also isn't quite as good with really thin wire. You don't want to use like 26 or 28 gauge wire, which is very thin. But you can get up to, like I'm using 20 gauge wire, no problem. And this has been through a lot. So I wouldn't worry about it not being sharp, but you don't want to bring in like 16 gauge wire into this. I think that's going to be hard to cut.
I think 18 is probably about the
18 is good.
It's about the thickest that you want to use, right?
Right, 20. I've used it. Yes, I have used it on 18 gauge too. But excuse me, the heavier wires are going to be really hard to cut also. So
I just wanted to interject as me, the person who doesn't do wire.
yes,
I actually like this tool. So that's high praise from from the person who does as little wire work as possible.
Right. And again, the really cool thing about this is, even though you have to go in with a round nose and do those little adjustments, you're making the same size loop every time. It's so much faster and easier and cleaner than trying to do it with your round nose, especially if you're kind of new or you don't have a lot of experience in this particular medium in wire. So.
Okay, and so now you're at 10 minutes.
Okay, well, I am going to say then, that remember, this is the looper. There's 2 sizes of it, I think, that are carried at Michael's, and you can find the other things, the beads. This is the Bead Landing Southwest box, artistic wire, other tools and things, certainly from the Beadsmith at Michael's. So I'm Leslie Rogalski, here with Leslie Pope on behalf of Beadsmith and Michael's. There I am. On behalf of Beadsmith and Michael's, I hope you had fun. I hope you learned something. And I hope you feel that this has made you a better beader. Thanks for joining us. Bye.